My parents left for France, leaving me in hospital. After a horrific car accident, my parents left for France, abandoning me to die in the hospital. A text arrived. We're in Paris. Forget us. Silently, I blocked their accounts. My mother called later, weeping, begging for forgiveness, but Hello. Before we begin, please tell us what country you're watching from, whether you've subscribed to the channel, and if you've liked this video. Enjoy listening. It's strange to realize that sometimes it takes a car accident to understand the simplest truths about loved ones and your true place in their lives. At 42, I finally grasped that my entire adult life was built on an illusion of family loyalty and care. My younger brother Sam lost his job 6 years ago. Back then it seemed temporary. A promising young programmer just didn't see eye to eye with his boss. It's nothing serious, Sam, Mom reassured him over the phone. Look for something better. You're so talented. Employers will be fighting over you. I just added, yes, of course. If you need financial help while searching, I'll help. Months stretched into years. Sam was finding himself. First, web design courses I paid for, then personal growth seminars I paid for, then burnout therapy from job hunting, also paid by me. In between came new gadgets, festival trips, gym memberships, and endless promises that things would get better soon. Sam is 35 now and still lives with our parents in the apartment I helped them buy 10 years ago, covering most of the mortgage. Our parents are retired. Dad, a former engineer at a defense plant, gets a decent pension by today's standards, but not lavish. Mom, a former librarian. Her pension is very modest. Fine, I thought. They're from the Soviet generation, used to different standards. It's hard for them to adapt. So every month, I sent money for Dad's medicine, Mum's new boots, Sam's English courses, bathroom repairs, a trip to the sanatorium. I work for a major pharmaceutical company promoting drugs. My career was successful, but the work is stressful, constant travel, meetings, presentations, reports. Sometimes I collapsed from exhaustion when I got home. But I managed. Thankfully, my single lifestyle, never married, no kids, allowed me to dedicate all my time to work. At least I helped my family, I consoled myself when sadness washed over me. Lately, I noticed how tired my parents looked. Mom complained more often about her joints, the weather, the neighbors. Dad was quieter, his gaze somehow extinguished. And then it hit me. They needed a real, quality vacation. I decided to gift them a trip to France, the country Mum had dreamed of since her youth, where she wanted to see the Louvre and Dad could try real Bordeaux. I planned this trip for 2 months. I found a cozy little hotel in central Paris, arranged Russian-speaking tours, planned each day of their stay. I took on an extra project for this, presenting a new antibiotic in 3 cities. I returned to my hotel after midnight, grabbing a sandwich from a gas station cafe. But I was warmed by the thought of their joy when they'd discover the surprise. I deliberately didn't tell them in advance. I wanted to see their expressions when I handed them the envelope with tickets and vouchers. I imagined Mom throwing up her hands and crying happy tears, Dad hugging me tightly, something he rarely did. I treasured these imagined emotions like precious jewels. Then, 2 weeks ago, on a Wednesday, I was driving to an important meeting with a potential partner. It was a gloomy day, drizzling rain. The GPS suggested the I-90, but there were traffic jams, so I decided to cut through a new development area. The road was unfamiliar. I was a bit nervous, rushing, and didn't notice the light turn yellow at an intersection. I thought I could make it. Then came the impact, the screech of metal, the sound of shattering glass, sharp pain in my side, and darkness. I woke up in the ICU. A nurse with kind, tired eyes leaned over me. "You were lucky," she said. "It could have been much worse. We had to remove your spleen, several ribs are broken, but you'll live long and happily if you're more careful driving." My first thought wasn't about myself, but the meeting I'd missed, then about my parents. I needed to warn them. A day later, I was moved from the ICU to a regular room. A colleague, Miss Peterson, a woman nearing retirement whom I'd worked alongside for years, brought me my phone and charger. I called my parents. "Mom, don't worry, I'm okay," I started, but she interrupted. "Helen, we already know. The hospital called us the day of the accident. We're coming to see you tomorrow." Warmth spread through me. Family is still family. They're there in difficult times. The next day, my parents did come. I heard their voices in the hallway before they entered the room. Mom spoke loudly, with those characteristic drawn-out vowels and rising tone at the end of phrases I'd recognize anywhere. The same way she talked to neighbors in the courtyard of our old house on the south side where I grew up. That courtyard with creaky chain swings and a sandbox where stray cats always wandered in. The door opened. Mom came in first, wearing the dark blue coat I'd given her last birthday, carrying a bag of oranges, her face etched with worry. Her hair was neater than usual, as if she were going to a formal event, not a hospital. Dad followed silently, as usual, in a worn leather jacket from the 90s, his bald spot carefully covered by hair combed sideways. And behind them, to my surprise, came Sam with a strange, impatient look. He wore a new jacket I'd never seen. Apparently, my recent money transfer had found its purpose. "Helen, how could this happen?" Mum lamented, sitting on the chair by the bed. The chair creaked under her weight. Her voice held more irritation than sympathy. She put the oranges on the nightstand next to my untouched hospital breakfast. "I hadn't been able to eat since the surgery. My appetite vanished completely. You're always rushing, always speeding somewhere. How could you?" Dad shuffled awkwardly by the door, clutching a worn baseball cap. Then he approached, squeezed my hand with his, calloused, warm, smelling of Marlboros, the only brand he'd smoked his whole life, despite my attempts to switch him to something less harmful. He sat on the dusty, stained windowsill, likely remnants from the Soviet era. Sam remained standing, arms crossed, surveying the room as if appraising renovation costs. "We were so worried," Mom continued, adjusting her dragonfly brooch, the one she wore on every coat and jacket I could remember. "Can you imagine the stress? Your father's blood pressure shot up to 180. I had to give him a double dose of Capoten. I didn't sleep all night thinking, what if it's serious? It could have been worse, right?" I managed a weak smile, feeling the stitches pull with every breath. "I'm sorry I worried you. I didn't expect it. It happened so fast." "Yeah," Sam snorted, glancing at his wristwatch. "Another gift from me for his 35th birthday. Always with your job. I told you, find something calmer, a normal 9-to-5 job without all the travel." I wanted to remind him that my job allowed him to avoid working altogether, that my abnormal travel meant he could afford to find himself for years, changing courses and seminars without worrying about rent or food. But I stayed silent. I didn't want to start a fight right there, where thin partitions separated other patients, where every loud word echoed down the hall. "Helen," Mum suddenly turned serious, lowering her voice to the intimate whisper reserved for family secrets or neighbor gossip. "Listen, We have something important to discuss." I tensed inwardly. Something in her tone put me on alert. It was the same inflection she used in childhood to tell me my beloved cat Merker had been hit by a car, or that our seaside trip was cancelled because of Dad's work problems. "Remember, you said you wanted to surprise us." She glanced at Dad as if seeking support, but he stared silently out the window at the grey April sky. "Well, Sam accidentally found an email from a travel agency about France." I was stunned. Shreds of questions raced through my mind. First, how did Sam access my email? We never shared devices. I was always meticulous about password security, a professional habit. Second, why bring this up now? When I'm lying here on an IV drip with antibiotics, every movement echoing with pain. "Yes, I wanted to surprise you," I answered cautiously, keeping my voice even. "The trip was planned for next month, May 20th. Mom exchanged looks with Dad, then with Sam, and turned back to me. That silent exchange held a conspiratorial note that sent a chill down my spine. "Helen, you see," Mom took my hand, stroking my wrist with her thumb as she did in childhood to calm me before a shot or an unpleasant talk with the teacher. "We thought, well, the trip is already paid for. Tickets bought. And you? Well, you're in this state now. The doctor said you'll be in the hospital for at least a month, then rehabilitation. So we decided we'd go, the three of us. No sense wasting the trip." Her words hung in the air like cigarette smoke in an unventilated room, heavy, suffocating. I felt everything inside me turn cold. For a second I thought I'd misheard, that it was some drug-induced dream. "You want to go to France now while I'm here?" My voice sounded alien, like it belonged to someone else. "What's wrong with that?" Sam interjected, pushing off the wall and stepping closer to the bed. He wore an expensive-looking new cashmere sweater. "You planned it yourself, wanted it yourself. Now you can't go anyway. And the money's spent. It's logical we go, and you can go another time when you're better." The cynicism in his tone was so profound, nausea rose in my throat. Not from pain or medication, but from the sudden realization of who my brother truly was. The person I'd helped raise, read bedtime stories to, taught to ride a bike, given my pocket money for ice cream. I looked at Dad. He was always reticent, preferring to listen to others and agree with the loudest voice, usually Mom's. Now he lowered his eyes, avoiding my gaze, and muttered, "Mum's right, Helen. We all need a break. You have good doctors here, a decent hospital, but you know how it is at home." Something broke inside me at that moment, something fragile and vital, perhaps the last shred of faith that my family truly cared for me, not just about themselves. Like a taut string stretched to its limit, it snapped with a quiet but distinct chime only I could hear. There wasn't a shadow of doubt or a gram of guilt on their faces. They genuinely believed their decision was absolutely right and natural. It wasn't even pure selfishness, more like a deeply ingrained habit of perceiving my help and resources as a given, something they were entitled to by birthright. "Just give us access to the bookings," Mum said, pulling a worn floral notebook from her bag, the one I'd given her for March 8th back in school. "I'll write down all the details before we leave. We'll come by again, tell you how it goes." Her voice held no trace of doubt, no guilt. For her, it was the perfectly logical solution: to enjoy Parisian cafes and boulevards, Louvre halls and Versailles gardens, while her daughter recovered from a life-threatening accident. "We need to hurry with the visas," Sam added, glancing at his watch again as if he had an important meeting. "Less than a month till the trip. By the way, that Versailles tour seems to end after the metro closes. We should see about booking a taxi in advance." They were already mentally strolling down the Champs-Élysées while I watched the IV drip methodically counting drops of antibiotics meant to prevent infection after my spleen removal. I looked at them and didn't recognize them. Were these the same parents who once taught me to care for others? Who instilled in me that family stands together? Mum, who loved quoting White Son of the Desert, "The East is a delicate matter, Petruka," and then adding, "And family is a delicate matter, Helen. No one will care for you like your own flesh and blood." "You know," I said slowly, my mouth dry, "I need to think. I'm not thinking clearly right now because of the meds. Come back tomorrow and we'll discuss it." Mum pursed her lips. Displeasure flashed across her face, that same expression I remembered from childhood when I asked for 5 more minutes to play outside or refused to eat semolina porridge. "Helen, there's nothing to think about. We're not asking for money. It's all paid for. Just give us access to the bookings." "I understand, Mom, but I need time." I tried to speak calmly, though everything inside me was boiling. "What time?" Sam flared up, his face taking on that petulant look I remembered from his teenage years. "Afraid we'll spend your money? They're already spent. Even if we don't go, you won't get them back." "What nonsense, you've always been practical." For a moment I thought it was all a prank, an episode from a surreal film or dream. They couldn't seriously be discussing a trip to Paris at the bedside of their nearly dead daughter and sister. I closed my eyes. The pain in my side intensified, nausea rose again. The room started spinning like the merry-go-round from my childhood in Grant Park, the very one where Mum and I once laughed, holding hands, watching the blurry lights of the evening park. "Please, I really don't feel well. Let's talk tomorrow," I whispered, feeling cold sweat trickle down my temples. Mom stood up, pursing her lips disapprovingly, as she always did when she didn't get immediate agreement. I remembered that grimace from childhood. It heralded long hours of silence and dramatic sighs. Dad followed her, glancing back guiltily, clutching his cap as if trying to wring water from it. Sam snorted demonstratively like a spoiled teen, not a 35-year-old man. "All right, rest." Mom threw over her shoulder at the door, adjusting her dragonfly brooch. "We'll come early tomorrow. Think carefully. The money's spent anyway. Might as well let someone enjoy it." After they left, I lay for a long time, staring at the ceiling where a wide crack resembled a winding river on a map. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of pain or hurt anymore. Something else pushed through the bitterness. Something like clarity, like waking from a long hypnotic sleep. Everything became clear, like in that childhood fairy tale about the emperor's new clothes Mom used to read to me. Only I wasn't the child shouting the truth. I was the tailor who had spent years weaving invisible cloth, deceiving myself most of all. "Sister, how are you?" Nurse Ms. Harrison peeked into the room. She was about my age, with intelligent eyes and smile lines at the corners. She belonged to that Soviet-era breed of nurses who called patients sister or brother, regardless of age. Her voice held more compassion than I'd heard from my own mother the entire visit. "Okay," I answered, wiping tears with the back of my hand like I did as a child. "Just family problems." Ms. Harrison sat carefully on the edge of my bed, mindful of my stitches. "I saw your relatives," she said gently, straightening my blanket with professional care. "Don't be offended, but you know what I thought." Our generation was raised believing family is everything, the most important thing. Like in the movie Moscow Does Not Believe in Tears, always supportive, always there. But now, watching my patients, I realize sometimes strangers show more sympathy than your own blood. Like in Vysotski's song, I don't like it when it's halfway. Either you care for real or don't pretend. Her words held that rare honesty I hadn't heard in years, simple human truth without evasions or self-justification. They opened some floodgate inside me. I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, pouring out all the pain and tension of the last years. Ms. Harrison just sat there holding my hand. That simple gesture of human support meant more than all my family's visits. It was a touch without hidden motives, without expectation of return, without calculation. Just compassion from one person to another. "Cry, sister," she said softly. "Tears aren't only from grief. Sometimes they're from clarity, like rain washing away dirt and letting you see the world anew." That night, I couldn't sleep. Despite the painkillers meant to plunge me into slumber, I lay with open eyes, listening to the muffled sounds of the hospital. The scent of blooming apple trees from the hospital garden drifted through the slyly open window. April had arrived early and warm this year. Fragments of memories spun in my head. I recalled Mum teaching me table manners as a child. "Sit up straight, Helen. You're a young lady." How Dad first showed me the starry sky through an old telescope given to him by colleagues for his 50th birthday. Those warm moments contrasted sharply with the cold calculation behind their decision about the trip. The longer I thought, the clearer it became. It wasn't about the money. Money was just a symptom. The disease had much deeper roots. I didn't feel valued by my family, only useful, like an ATM, a resource, a tool to solve their problems. By morning, I'd made a decision. A therapist I worked with years ago had said, "Sometimes loving means setting boundaries, and for those who've never seen them, those boundaries will look like walls." It was time to build those walls. When Miss Harrison brought my morning medication, I asked for help. "Miss Harrison, I really need my phone and laptop. It's important." She looked at me carefully, as if assessing if I could handle the emotional load. Then she nodded. "The doctor didn't object to the phone if you follow the routine. I'll bring your things, but promise not to overexert yourself." 15 minutes later, I had my phone and laptop. I started acting immediately, ignoring the numerous missed calls and messages. First, I contacted the bank where I had a personal manager, Victor. We'd known each other for years. I sent my parents' allowance through him, arranged powers of attorney, and issued supplementary cards. "Good morning, Victor. Urgent matter. I need all supplementary cards to my account blocked and access changed." "Helen Miller." His voice sounded concerned. "I heard about the accident. How are you?" "Recovering, but something else is important now. I need to urgently revoke third-party access to my accounts." "Of course we'll do it. But are you sure? Usually in difficult situations, family help." "Victor," I interrupted, feeling my voice tremble. "It's because of family I need this. Please, just do as I ask." Something in my tone convinced him not to ask further questions. He promised everything would be done within an hour. Next, I contacted the travel agent, Susan, with whom I'd booked the France trip. Opening our correspondence, I caught myself thinking how strange it was to see all those enthusiastic messages full of plans and expectations as if from another life. "Susan, good afternoon. Unfortunately, I must cancel the trip due to health reasons. I was in an accident, had surgery." The reply came minutes later. "Helen, terribly sorry to hear. Hope you recover. Good you warned us early. We can cancel everything with minimal losses. Get well." No prying questions, no pressure, just human concern and professionalism. Why was it easier with strangers than with family? I cancelled all the bookings one by one, hotel, transfers, tours. With each call, each email, I shed an invisible weight. It felt like decluttering a junk-filled room. At first, the chaos seems worse, but gradually order and lightness emerge. After cancelling the bookings, I took a break. I put the laptop aside, but the phone kept buzzing with incoming messages. Dozens of missed calls from Mum and Sam. They'd tried calling over 20 times since morning. I knew the conversation was inevitable, but I wanted it on my terms. So I sent Mom a brief text. I cancelled the trip and blocked your supplementary cards. We'll talk later when I'm ready. I need peace now. Less than a minute later, the phone rang. Mom flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. What nonsense are you pulling? Her voice rang with outrage. What right do you have to dispose of our trip? You promised. I was struck that her first question wasn't about my well-being, my post-op state, but the trip. It opened my eyes completely. Mom, I said calmly, though my heart pounded in my throat. I planned this trip as a gift. But after your visit yesterday, it became clear that a vacation in France is more important to you than my condition. What rubbish! We just didn't want the money wasted. You're always so practical. Practical, yes, but some things are more important than money. And right now, recovering is more important to me than thinking about you enjoying Paris while I lie in a hospital bed. I heard her move the phone away and say something quickly, probably to Dad or Sam. Then Sam's voice came on. Helen, this is ridiculous. Think logically. The money's spent. What difference does it make to you if we go or not? It doesn't affect you. It matters to me, Sam, and it's not just about the trip. I can't support this financial dependence anymore. It's unhealthy for all of us. So you, his voice changed, panic creeping in. You won't help Mum and Dad anymore. Or me. I'm not refusing to help entirely, but it will be different now, targeted for specific needs, not unlimited access to my accounts. How dare you? After everything they've done for you, he was almost shouting. They raised you, taught you, fed you. Yes, and I'm grateful for that. That's why I've helped generously financially for the last 10 years, but things are changing now. A heavy pause hung on the line, then Mom's voice again, but different now, wheedling. Helen, you probably don't understand what you're saying. It's the medication, the stress after the accident. Let us come. Talk calmly. I'll bake your favorite apple pie. This abrupt tactic change was so predictable I almost smiled. First anger and accusations, then when that failed, an attempt to manipulate sympathy. No, Mom, no visits today. I'm tired, I need to rest, and I'm thinking perfectly clearly, believe me. But how will we live? Her voice trembled. Your father's medicine is expensive. We have bills. Mom, I tried to speak softly but firmly. I've thought it through. When I recover, we'll sit down and discuss how I can help with specific expenses, but right now, I need peace. Please respect that. I ended the call, feeling a strange mix of emptiness and freedom. My temples throbbed, my hands shook, but inside a quiet resolve spread. The phone rang again. I didn't answer. It rang and rang until I silenced it. Perhaps for the first time in my life I'd chosen my own well-being, and however painful it was the right choice. Outside the hospital window, sparse clouds drifted, and I thought about how much time we spend trying to change others instead of changing ourselves, and how hard it is to admit that sometimes the closest people can inflict the deepest pain. An hour later, an elderly nurse I hadn't seen before, with short grey hair and a faded badge, peeked in. Ms. Thompson, you have a visitor, she said. A young man introduced himself as your colleague. I tensed. Colleagues didn't know about my accident yet, at least I hadn't told anyone. What's his name? Nicholas Evans. Says it's important business. I exhaled in relief. Nicholas Evans was our senior medical representative, someone I deeply respected. Yes, please, let him in. He entered with a bouquet of daisies and a bag of fruit. I barely held back tears. He was the first visitor who came not with demands or complaints, but with genuine care. Helen Miller, he sat on the edge of a chair. Oliver Davies has everyone on alert since he heard about your accident. We were worried. Thank you for coming. I was touched. But how did you know I was here? News travels faster than drugs in our field, he smiled. One of the doctors here, a client of ours, saw you, recognized you, and called me. We talked for almost an hour. He spoke about work, funny client stories. A new drug the company was preparing to launch. Ordinary work talk, but it brought me back to normal life, reminding me that beyond the hospital walls existed a whole world where I was valued not for money or help, but for my professionalism and character. As Nicholas was leaving, he said something that stuck with me. You know, Helen Miller, in medicine, there's the concept of secondary gain from illness. That's when an ailment gives a person something besides suffering. Attention from loved ones, the right not to make decisions, a way to avoid responsibility. Sometimes a person clings to the illness subconsciously for that gain, but there's also the reverse process, when illness becomes a turning point, a moment of truth. And then, despite its destructiveness, it brings renewal. I think that's your case. His words stayed with me as I fell asleep that night. For the first time since the accident, I slept deeply and peacefully, without anxious dreams or waking from pain, as if my body, exhausted by trauma, and my soul, exhausted by years of quiet sacrifice, were finally beginning to heal. Perhaps this accident really was the turning point I needed, the moment when vague dissatisfaction with life crystallized into a clear decision. It was time to change, time to learn to live for myself, not selfishly, but consciously, with care for my own well-being. And though this path wouldn't be easy, it would be real, my own path. The next day, I woke to quiet conversation. My attending physician, Dr. Collins, an older man with grey temples and an attentive gaze, was talking to my roommate. Judging by their calm voices and even soft laughter, she was recovering well. Ah, awake? He smiled, noticing my open eyes. How are you feeling? You had a slight fever last night. Really? I was surprised. I didn't notice. That's good, he nodded. Means you slept soundly. And now? I listened to my body. The pain in my side had lessened, breathing was easier, and surprisingly, my head was clear for the first time in ages, despite all the medication. Better, I answered honestly. Much better. Excellent. Dr. Collins made a note in the chart. Let's check the stitches. While he examined my wound, I studied his hands, confident with long fingers and neatly trimmed nails. The hands of a man who'd saved lives for decades. I wondered how many people were grateful to him simply for being alive. Healing well, he stated. If this continues, stitches out in a week. Thank you, Dr. Collins, for everything. He looked at me with mild surprise. It's my job, Helen Miller, but still nice to hear. Many patients take our actions for granted. After the doctor left, I asked a nurse to help me walk to the shower. In a hospital gown leaning on her arm, I moved slowly down the corridor. Snatches of conversation, TV sounds, someone's laughter came from half-open doors of other rooms. Normal hospital life, something I'd only observed from the outside before, visiting Dad after his eye surgery. The shower room was small, with tiles peeling in places from the Soviet era, but the clean, warm water washed away not just the hospital smell, but also the weight of yesterday's conversation with my family. Returning to the room, I found visitors waiting. Olivia and Marina, my colleagues from the marketing department, sat on chairs by the bed, chatting animatedly. Seeing me, they jumped up. "Helen!" Olivia, a petite, energetic woman I'd started working with back in the early 2000s when the farmer market was just forming, rushed towards me. "Finally! We thought you'd been taken for tests." "Girls," I smiled, bewildered, trying to tie my gown tighter. "How are you here? You thought we'd abandon you." Marina snorted, a younger colleague I'd once taken under my wing. "We tried coming the day before yesterday, but you'd just been moved from ICU. They wouldn't let us in." They helped me settle into bed, carefully placing a pillow behind my back. Only then did I notice the bags they'd brought. "We brought a few things," Olivia started unpacking onto the nightstand. "Homemade borscht, Marina's recipe. She's a master. Fruit, yogurts, and we brought pajamas, slippers. Hospital issue isn't very comfortable, right?" I looked at these simple things: a thermos of borscht, neatly folded floral pajamas, soft slippers, and felt a lump rise in my throat. These people, whom I knew from work, saw at meetings and corporate events, showed more care than my own family. "Thank you," I managed. "You have no idea how much this means." "Nonsense," Marina waved her hand. "We're a team. The whole department is worried. Oliver Davies even wanted to come himself, but he has a meeting with the ministry." Oliver Davies, our director, always seemed a bit aloof to me, focused solely on business processes. The thought that he worried about me was unexpected and touching. "And," Olivia lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "he said the company will fully cover your treatment under the voluntary health insurance, and while you're on sick leave, your full salary is maintained." This was incredible. Of course, I knew about the VHI. I'd handled the paperwork myself, but knowing in theory was different from encountering real support. "But our policy doesn't cover such long sick leave," I doubted. "For you it does," Marina stated confidently. "You're our key employee. Oliver Davies said he initiated an internal program to support valuable staff, and you're first on the list." We talked for almost an hour. They shared office news, funny stories, how Peterson from logistics got stuck in the elevator with the sales director and tried to pitch his project, how Susan from accounting finally dyed her hair purple, something she dreamed of since her youth in the 80s, about new drugs about to hit the market. Gradually, I felt myself returning to life. Not the life where I was an ATM for my family, but a normal human life filled with simple joys, laughter, and everyday concerns. When they finally gathered to leave, Olivia needed to pick up her grandson from kindergarten. Marina had an evening pottery class. I felt not emptiness, but warm gratitude. "Girls, thank you. Truly," I said goodbye. "Don't mention it," Olivia smiled. "By the way, we made a schedule of who visits when. Nicholas Evans planned for tomorrow, Friday. Me with Kate from the regional department, so you won't get bored." After they left, I ate some borscht. It was so delicious I felt real appetite for the first time since being hospitalized. Later, a nurse helped me change into the pajamas they brought. That evening, when the lights were dimmed and my roommate was peacefully dozing, Ms. Harrison peeked in. "How's the mood?" she asked quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I see you had visitors today." "Yes, colleagues from work," I smiled. "You know, I never thought they'd react like this. We weren't particularly close outside the office." In difficult times, the true nature of relationships always shows, Ms. Harrison observed philosophically. By the way, someone else was asking for you. I tensed. My parents? Yes, she nodded. Came by about an hour ago, but it was already lights out, and Dr. Collins advised against upsetting you, so I told them you couldn't be disturbed. I squeezed her hand gratefully. Thank you. I'm not sure I'm ready for that conversation. Ms. Harrison nodded understandingly. They weren't very pleased, especially the younger man, kept demanding to be let in as immediate family. Sam? Of course. They probably hadn't expected me to actually block the cards. Maybe they thought it was an empty threat. And now, faced with reality, they came to reason with me. You did the right thing not letting them in, I said. I need time to gather my thoughts. I understand, the nurse nodded, and you need rest now, not hassle. By the way, your phone. She pulled my smartphone from her pocket. Lots of messages, but I turned the sound off. Please keep it for now, I asked. At least until tomorrow. If anyone calls about work, let me know. When Miss Harrison left, I lay awake for a long time, thinking about how strangely life is arranged. We spend years building relationships, investing energy, emotions, resources. And suddenly, in a moment of crisis, it turns out it was all built on shaky ground. And conversely, people we considered mere colleagues, acquaintances, suddenly show such sincere care we never even dreamed of. I remembered the movie Autumn Marathon with Oleg Basilashvili, the one from the 80s Mom and I watched on an old black and white TV. There was a monologue about how we often confuse selfishness with care and weakness of will with kindness. It seemed I'd made that mistake all my life, mistaking my inability to say no for love and my family's manipulations for their natural right. But now, lying on a hospital bed, I suddenly understood that my life was truly mine, and I had every right to decide how to live it, and with whom. The evening city hummed outside, cars honking, snippets of music from passing cars, a train whistled in the distance, life went on, and I was part of it, not an appendage to others' desires, not an ATM, not an eternal rescuer, but an independent person with the right to her own happiness. With this thought, I fell asleep for the first time in many years with a sense of amazing lightness and anticipation of change. The morning started with rounds. Dr. Collins was pleased with my condition. Recovering faster than we expected, he said after listening to my heart. If this continues, we can talk about discharge in a week. Without patient follow-up and limited physical activity, of course. I nodded, feeling a surge of energy. The prospect of going home no longer scared me as before. On the contrary, I began making plans. After rounds and breakfast, which I finished completely for the first time, Ms. Harrison came in with my phone. Here, she said, handing it to me. I think you're strong enough now to handle this. I smiled. Thank you for caring. I do feel much stronger today. Unlocking the screen, I saw many notifications, several missed calls from Mom, Dad, Sam, dozens of messages in the messenger, an email notification. Taking a deep breath, I opened the messenger. Messages from family escalated. First bewilderment, then indignation, then threats. We'll tell everyone what kind of daughter you are. And finally, attempts to play on pity. Dad is very bad, worried. Nothing new, really. The same tactics they'd used for years to get what they wanted. There were messages from colleagues, too. Oliver Davies inquired about my well-being. Susan from accounting wrote she'd processed all the sick leave paperwork. Nicholas Evans said he'd stop by that afternoon. I replied to the colleagues, thanking them for their care. I left the family messages unanswered. I wasn't ready for another round of manipulation. Instead, I opened my email and found a message from the airline confirming a refund for the tickets. Part of the sum was withheld as a penalty, but most would be returned within a week. The hotel also sent a cancellation confirmation. The penalty there was larger, but I still got a significant amount back. Unexpectedly, I found an email from my bank manager, Victor. Helen Miller, good day, confirming your instruction to block supplementary cards has been executed. However, I wish to draw your attention that your relatives visited our office this morning, attempting to lift the restrictions, claiming you were in a severe condition and not of sound mind. We, of course, refused without your personal authorization. Please confirm at your earliest convenience that the block was indeed initiated at your behest. So that was it. They hadn't just come to the hospital, they'd tried to circumvent my ban through the bank. It didn't even surprise me, just confirmed the rightness of my decision. I quickly wrote back, confirming my actions and thanking Victor for his vigilance. I added, and for the future, no changes to access to my accounts without my personal presence at the branch or a formally notarized power of attorney. Sending the email, I suddenly felt something akin to joy inside, quiet, calm, but distinct. For the first time in a long time, I was acting in my own interests, protecting myself and my boundaries. And this feeling was so new, so fresh, I almost physically felt my inner spine straightening, bent for years under the weight of others' expectations. After lunch, as promised, Nicholas Evans arrived. This time he wasn't alone. He brought 3 colleagues, Olivia from finance, a young marketer named David, and Marina, whom I'd started working with back in the early 2000s. A delegation from the office, Nicholas smiled, unpacking treats onto the nightstand. Everyone wanted to see you in person, make sure you're on the mend. I was deeply touched. It never occurred to me that employees I mainly saw at meetings and corporate events would care so much about my misfortune. You have no idea how everyone scrambled when they found out, Olivia said, adjusting her signature red-framed glasses. Oliver Davies first thing dug up all the insurance info, made sure the company would cover the costs. And he ordered a visitation schedule, David chimed in, so you wouldn't feel lonely. I'm on duty Monday, by the way. I laughed, imagining the serious Oliver Davies scheduling visits to a sick employee. You don't have to, I began, but Marina cut me off. Of course we don't have to. We want to. You've always been our support. Now it's our turn. These simple words touched me deeply. At the office, I was used to being strong, organized, solving others' problems. Suddenly I discovered that behind formal relationships lay something more, a genuine human connection. The colleagues shared work news, funny stories. David told how the VP of sales got stuck in an old elevator with a new intern and spent an hour and a half explaining corporate culture before they were freed. Olivia invited me to her son's birthday next month. The boy was turning 10 and she was planning a Star Wars-themed party. For a while I completely forgot about my family drama, the pain, the hospital, as if I dipped into another world, normal, warm, human. When they got ready to leave, I felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you for coming. You have no idea how important this is. We'll come again, Nicholas promised, and not just to the hospital. When you're discharged, you won't be alone either. After they left, I asked Ms. Harrison to help me walk to the hospital garden. I wanted fresh air to touch the world beyond the ward. The day was clear, truly spring-like. Young leaves rustled softly in a light breeze. The first flowers bloomed in the flower beds. Miss Harrison and I strolled leisurely along the paths, and I felt strength returning with each step. "You know," the nurse said unexpectedly, looking at a flowering cherry tree, "I saw you before in an ad for your pharma company on TV. You were talking about some allergy medication." I looked at her surprised. "Really? That was about 3 years ago. I almost forgot. Marketing insisted on using someone internal, not a professional actress." "You spoke well, convincingly," she nodded. "I thought then, that person is where they belong." "Did you always want to be a nurse?" She looked thoughtfully into the distance. "Actually, I dreamed of being a doctor. Even got into medical school, but it didn't work out. Family circumstances. Had to leave after my 3rd year, husband, kids, work. Life passed, but the dream stayed." "It's never too late to go back," I said. "There are so many opportunities for distance learning now." "At 58? She snorted skeptically. "Who needs me with a diploma at that age?" "Yourself," I replied firmly. "First and foremost yourself, so you don't regret what didn't happen." She looked at me attentively, as if seeing me for the first time. "You know what's surprising? You're lying in a hospital after surgery and you're comforting me. What a strange conversation we're having." We laughed, and this simple, sincere laughter was the best medicine. We sat on a bench under a flowering apple tree. Its white-pink petals drifted slowly to the ground, creating a delicate carpet around us. "You know," I said, watching 2 sparrows busily pecking in the young grass, "all my life, I believed caring for family was an unconditional duty, that if I could help, I must. Mom instilled that in me from childhood, that family is sacred." "All true," Ms. Harrison nodded, "but care should be mutual. I went through it myself." She told me her story, supporting an alcoholic husband for 20 years, giving all her strength and resources, believing it was her duty to endure and help. How he hit their son in a drunken stupor and something broke inside her. How hard it was to kick him out. How neighbors and relatives condemned her. "You know what was most surprising?" she asked, looking at the clouds. "He got his act together when he realized I wouldn't save him anymore. He started saving himself. 15 years sober now. Works. Remarried. If I'd kept enabling him, I might have buried him long ago." Her story resonated deeply. I suddenly saw a parallel to my own situation. For years I'd rescued my family, not letting them learn to stand on their own. "How did you cope with the guilt?" I asked. "Surely it was there." "It was," she nodded, "especially at first. My mother called every day saying I'd destroyed the family, that it wasn't Christian to abandon a husband in need. But then I saw how my son changed. He stopped flinching at loud noises, started doing better in school, began to smile. And I understood that if my choice brought so much good to at least one person, it was the right one." We sat in silence, watching light clouds drift across the sky. Music played somewhere in the distance, an old Soviet pop song drifting from an open window. Suddenly, a loud voice broke our idyll. "Ms. Harrison, you're urgently needed in Block 3. The nurse stood up. "Sorry, I have to go. Can you get back to your room alone?" "Of course," I smiled. "I know the way by now." Alone I sat a little longer, enjoying the quiet and peace. This pause in the relentless events was necessary to catch my breath, process what had happened, and chart a path forward. Returning to the ward, I heard loud voices from the corridor. One, high-pitched and agitated, I recognized instantly, my mother's voice. "I don't care about your rules. I have the right to see my daughter. Do you know how much I've done for her?" The second voice belonged to the duty nurse. "Ma'am, calm down. We have a routine. The patient needs rest. If you keep shouting, I'll call security." I stopped, leaning against the wall. I didn't want to intervene, didn't want to plunge back into that whirlpool of emotions and accusations. I wanted to turn around and go back to the garden, to silence and peace. But I knew running away wasn't a solution. Sooner or later, I'd have to face my family and all the difficult feelings associated with them. I took a deep breath and walked towards the noise. Seeing me, Mum instantly shifted her focus. "There you are. We've been looking everywhere. What nonsense have you pulled? Blocking cards? What kind of game is this?" Her face was flushed with excitement. Anger and fear mixed in her eyes. Dad stood nearby, awkwardly shifting his weight. Sam looked irritated, poorly concealing it. The young nurse looked relieved as she stepped back. "Ms. Thompson, I explained to your relatives now isn't the time for visits, but they insist." "It's all right, Natasha," I tried to smile. "I'll talk to them." I turned to my family. "Let's go to the room, but please, no shouting. There are sick people here." In the room, under the curious gaze of my elderly roommate with a bandaged leg, the scene I'd expected and feared unfolded. "What are you doing?" Mom began, lowering her voice to a hissing whisper. "We've been without money for 3 days. Your father needs his medicine and there's not a penny on the card." I looked at Dad. He looked embarrassed and clearly uncomfortable. "Dad, do you need medicine?" I asked directly. "Which ones? I can transfer money specifically for those." Before he could answer, Sam cut in. "Helen," his tone was almost professional, like talking to a difficult client. "Let's drop the drama, just unblock the cards and we'll forget this conversation. After all, you always helped." "What changed?" "What changed, Sam," I said firmly, "is that I ended up in the hospital after nearly dying in an accident and realized something important. Life is short and it needs to be spent consciously." "What's that got to do with it?" He snorted. "We're talking about money, not philosophy." "And I'm talking about life," I stated firmly. "My life, which I've built around your needs for years, that ends now." Mom threw up her hands. "Oh God, she's been watching those Western shows about toxic relationships. Next, she'll be talking about abuse and gaslighting." Unexpectedly, Dr. Collins, who had entered for evening rounds, intervened. "What's going on here?" His tone was calm but authoritative. "Quiet hour, and it sounds like a marketplace." Mom, never losing her composure, turned to him instantly. "Are you the doctor? Tell me, is my daughter in her right mind? She cancelled our family trip, blocked bank cards. Is that normal after surgery?" Dr. Collins gave her a measured look. "Your daughter is fully conscious and competent. If she made financial decisions, that's her right. Now I must ask you all to leave the room. The patient needs rest." "We're her parents," Mom persisted. "We have a right to be with her." "In this hospital," Dr. Collins replied calmly, "your rights are limited by the internal regulations, and you're violating them now. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll call security." Something in his tone, his confident gaze, made them back down. Mum shot me a final indignant look. "This isn't over, Helen. We'll talk when you're more reasonable." Only Dad lingered at the door. He turned and unexpectedly said, "Get well, daughter." I try to explain to Mom. Something flickered in his gaze, regret or understanding. In that moment I felt a stab of hope. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe at least with Dad we could build new, healthy relationships. After they left, Dr. Collins stayed to check my vitals. "How do you feel after that visit?" he asked, taking my blood pressure. "Strange," I answered honestly. "Before, such scenes would knock me out for days. Now I feel almost calm." "That's a good sign," he nodded. You know, in medicine, there's a concept called psychosomatics. The body and mind are more connected than many think. I've seen patients who didn't improve despite all the medication because they clung to the illness. And I've seen those who recovered against the odds because they found an inner point of support. He put the blood pressure cuff back in his pocket. Your vitals are good, considering the stress. I think you're on the right path in every sense. When he left, I stared out the window for a long time at the ordinary Chicago evening life beyond the hospital fence. People rushed home from work, children played on playgrounds, elderly couples strolled arm in arm. Ordinary life, where everyone searches for their path, their truth, their point of support. And my point of support was beginning to emerge through pain, loss, and disappointment. It lay in recognizing my own worth, the right to choose my life, the ability to say no, even to the closest people if their demands crossed reasonable boundaries. For the first time in a long time, I felt not guilt, not anxiety, not responsibility for others' lives, but calm confidence in the rightness of my path. And this feeling was true healing, deeper than the mending of physical wounds. The next few days passed relatively calmly. Family didn't show up, though I learned from a security guard that Mom came once more but wasn't let in. Dr. Collins ordered visitation, restricted to only those I personally listed. I listed colleagues and Dad separately from Mom and Sam. Something told me I could still talk to him without pressure from the others. My condition improved daily. I could walk down the corridor by myself, go down to the hospital garden. The pain was almost gone, only slight discomfort with sudden movements. Dr. Collins was pleased with my progress. A few more days, and we'll remove the stitches, he said during morning rounds. Then, hopefully, discharge isn't far off. The thought of going home brought mixed feelings. On one hand, I wanted my familiar surroundings, my bed, my kitchen. On the other, I knew I was returning to the old environment as a different person, and it was unclear how it would receive me. One morning after breakfast, Miss Harrison peeked in. "You have a visitor," she said. "Your father." I tensed, then nodded. "Let him in." Dad entered hesitantly, as if afraid he'd be thrown out. He looked older and thinner. He held a small paper bag. "Hi, sweetheart," he said quietly. "Can I come in?" "Of course, Dad." I tried to smile. "Sit." He perched on the edge of a chair, placing the bag on the nightstand. "These are for you." He nodded at the bag. "Plums. I remember you loved them as a kid." I was touched. I really had adored ripe plums as a child, and Dad always bought them for me at the market on his way home from work. These small gestures were his way of showing love, not with words or hugs, but with quiet acts. "Thanks, Dad." I took a plum and bit into it. Sweet and juicy. Delicious. We sat in silence. Dad looked out the window, gathering his thoughts. "How are you?" he finally asked. "The doctors say I'll be discharged soon." "Yes, in a few days probably." I nodded. "I feel much better." Silence fell again. I could see Dad wanted to say something important, but couldn't find the words. "Dad," I decided to help him, "did you come alone? Does Mum know you're here?" He shook his head. "She doesn't. I said I was going to the clinic for prescriptions. She wouldn't approve." "Why?" "You know your mother." He sighed. "She thinks you acted wrongly, with the cards, the trip." "And you?" "What do you think?" Dad lifted his eyes to mine, tired, faded with age, but still clear. "I think we—" He hesitated, searching for words. "That we got too used to relying on you, too used." This simple, honest admission touched me deeply. I hadn't expected such openness from Dad, who was always taciturn and rarely expressed his thoughts directly. "Dad, I don't mind helping you," I said softly, "but not like before, not handing out money for everything, not funding Sam's endless courses that lead nowhere." "I understand," Dad nodded. "You're right about Sam. We spoiled him. I told Mom, but you know her, she always thought he was special, needed more time to find himself." "Dad, he's 35. How much more time does he need?" Dad gave a bitter chuckle. "I say the same thing, but no one listens, especially since I retired, as if losing my job meant losing my right to speak." I thought for the first time how hard it must have been for Dad all these years. He'd worked at one plant for nearly 40 years, was a respected specialist whose opinion mattered. Then suddenly he was just a retiree, a man without status, without influence, whose opinion meant nothing. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said sincerely. "I didn't think about how hard it was for you." "Why should you?" Dad shrugged. "You have your own life, your own problems. I should have been stronger, stood up to Mom, made Sam work." He paused, then added quietly, "You know, when I heard about your accident, I nearly went crazy with fear. Imagined you were gone and realized I'd lived the last years wrong." His eyes filled with tears. For the first time in my memory, I saw my father cry. Even at Grandma's funeral, his own mother, he'd held strong. "I'm so guilty before you, Helen." His voice trembled. "For letting this happen, for not protecting you from Mum's demands, from Sam's whims, for taking your money and staying silent, even though I saw how hard it was for you." I reached out and squeezed his palm, rough, veiny, marked with age spots. "Dad, don't torture yourself. I'm guilty too. I could have said no at any time, but I didn't, because it was easier to give money than to explain why I refused. Easier to agree than to argue." Dad nodded. "We all choose the path of least resistance and don't notice the years passing." We talked long that morning, truly openly for the first time in years. Dad told me how worried he was about Sam, how he tried to convince Mum he didn't need another retraining but just a job, any job, to feel responsibility. How angry he got when Mum called me for money but stayed silent because it was easier. How ashamed he felt in front of friends who asked what his son did, forcing him to invent stories about promising projects. "You know what's the most annoying?" he said at one point. "Sam is a talented guy, drew beautifully as a kid, teachers marveled, picked up programming instantly in college, and now he sits at the computer all day, playing games or reading stuff online. Life is passing him by." "He can still change, Dad," I said, though I didn't quite believe it. "If he gets the right push. Maybe your decision with the cards will be that push." Dad sighed. "Though right now he's just angry. Says you betrayed the family, that we should sue you." "Sue?" I couldn't believe my ears. "For what?" "For supposedly promising to support us and not keeping that promise." Dad shook his head. "Nonsense, of course. No documents, no promises. He's just looking for ways to pressure you." I felt a wave of anger rise inside me. So instead of thinking about his life, Sam was looking for ways to keep leeching off me. And Mom, what does she think about suing? She ... Dad hesitated. "She's not against. Says you need to understand that family is responsibility." I gave a bitter laugh. Interesting. What did that responsibility mean for her? In all these years she never once asked, "Isn't it hard for you? Aren't you tired? Do you need help?" "Your mother, she's a complicated person." Dad sighed. "Her parents were very strict, demanding, especially her father. He never praised, only pointed out mistakes, and she grew up believing love has to be earned, proven by your usefulness. This was new information. I knew Mum had a difficult childhood, but never connected her attitude towards me to her own experience. And she transfers that to me. Thinks I have to constantly prove my love and usefulness. Probably, Dad nodded. Only she doesn't realize it herself. For her, it's normal to expect sacrifice from a child because her parents expected it from her. We sat in silence pondering this. A thrush sang outside the window, its clear melody strangely contrasting with the heavy conversation. Dad, I finally said, I won't abandon you, but I won't go back to the old ways either. If you need money for specific things, medicine, groceries, I'll help, but no more cards with unlimited access and no support for Sam until he finds a job. Fair enough, Dad nodded. And I'll talk to Mum, try to explain. Don't know if she'll listen. Thanks, Dad, I squeezed his hand, for coming, for listening. As he left, he turned at the door and said something I hadn't heard from him, it seemed, since childhood. I'm proud of you, daughter, of the person you've become. Those simple words warmed me more than the most elaborate declaration of love. After Dad left, I sat by the window for a long time, watching people stroll along the garden paths. The conversation left me with a feeling of hope, weak but hope nonetheless, that not all bridges were burned, that at least with Dad, building new, healthy relationships was possible. Thoughts of Mom and Sam were more troubling. What if they really sued? But as Dad said, there were no documents, no legal obligations. Most likely it was just a scare tactic to force me back into the old pattern. In any case, there was no turning back. I was determined to change my life, and if that meant a temporary break with part of my family, so be it. That was the price of freedom. That evening, Oliver Davies called. It was highly unusual. He'd never called me personally before, preferring communication through his secretary or email. Helen Miller, his voice sounded unexpectedly warm. How are you feeling? Doctors say you're recovering. Yes, Oliver Davies, I answered, still surprised. Should be discharged soon. Excellent news. We're all worried about you here. He paused. Helen Miller, I'm calling about an important matter. The position of Deputy Director for Key Client Relations is opening up, and I'd like to offer it to you. I couldn't believe my ears. This meant a significant promotion, salary increase, and of course, greater responsibility. But why me? I asked, bewildered. We have more experienced staff. Experience isn't everything, Oliver Davies replied confidently. I need someone I can trust, someone with an analytical mind and organizational skills, and most importantly, someone who knows how to set healthy boundaries. Boundaries? I was surprised. Exactly. I could almost hear his smile over the line. You know, I've observed you for a long time. You're an excellent professional, but you've always been, how to put it, too available. Always taking on extra projects, staying late, working weekends. Such employees are valuable, but they often burn out. In the new role, you need to delegate, distribute workload, sometimes say no. Judging by what I've heard from colleagues, you're learning that art right now. I realized he knew about my family situation somehow, probably from Nicholas Evans or other visiting colleagues. So my personal situation... Helen Miller, Oliver Davies said seriously, I don't pry into employees' personal lives, but I value people who grow and develop, including through overcoming difficulties. If you've learned to set boundaries personally, you can do it professionally, and that's exactly what a leader needs. I was touched by his words and his faith in me. Thank you, Oliver Davies. I gladly accept your offer. Excellent. Satisfaction rang in his voice. Get well, Helen Miller. We're waiting for you at the office. But don't rush. Health comes first. After the call, I couldn't calm down for a long time. The promotion meant not just professional growth and increased income, but a new level of independence, a new degree of self-confidence. I went to the window and opened it. The evening air smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming apple trees. Spring was in full swing, promising new life not just for nature, but for me. Tomorrow they would remove my stitches. The day after, perhaps discharge, and then a new chapter of my life would begin. A chapter I would write myself, by my rules, on my terms. I didn't know what lay ahead, how relations with family would unfold, whether I'd cope with the new position, whether I'd find balance between caring for others and caring for myself. But one thing I knew for sure, I would no longer sacrifice myself for the ghost of approval, dissolve myself in others' desires and needs, because life is too short to live it by anyone else's rules, and sometimes it takes a near fatal accident to understand that simple truth. The day of discharge arrived surprisingly quickly. In the morning, Dr. Collins examined my stitches, removed the day before, and nodded approvingly, healing perfectly. I'd say you're recovering faster than most of my patients. Your body is strong despite all the stress. So home today? I asked, slightly nervous. Yes, he nodded, but with conditions. First, no physical exertion for at least 2 weeks. Second, take the medication I prescribe strictly on schedule. Third, come for a checkup in a week. Of course, Dr. Collins, I'll do everything. And one more thing, he looked at me intently. No nervous shocks. I understand your family situation is complicated, but try to shield yourself from conflict. Your body is especially vulnerable now. I nodded, understanding. The scene Mom and Sam caused in the hospital hadn't gone unnoticed. I'll manage, I assured him. And thank you for everything. It's my job, he smiled, but it's nice to hear gratitude. As I packed, Ms. Harrison came in. Over the days, we'd almost become friends despite the patient-nurse divide. Escaping us? She asked with a slight smile. Yes, I folded the pajamas my colleagues had brought. To be honest, it's a bit scary going home. That's normal, she nodded. After a long hospital stay, there's always anxiety. Here, everything's structured, routine, procedures, doctors always nearby. At home, you have to get used to independence again. It's not just that. I sat on the edge of the bed. No one's waiting, but all my things are there. Photos, mementos, and with them memories, some I'd rather forget. Ms. Harrison nodded understandingly. When I kicked my husband out, the first thing I did was put all his photos in a drawer. Didn't throw them away. He's my son's father after all, but I put them out of sight, and it felt easier to breathe immediately. I thought, maybe I should put away the family photos in the living room too. At least until I sorted out my feelings. Is anyone picking you up? Ms. Harrison asked, helping me pack the last things. Yes, a colleague. Marina promised to get me at noon. As if on cue, a nurse from admissions peeked in. Ms. Thompson, visitors for you, say they've come to take you home. I checked the clock. It was only 10. Early for Marina. Show them in, please. Can't, I said, expecting to see a colleague who'd finished early. But Sam stood in the doorway. Mom loomed behind him. Their faces showed triumph mixed with poorly concealed irritation. Helen, Mom exclaimed loudly, entering the room, we came to take you home. I was stunned. I hadn't spoken to them since the scene, hadn't mentioned discharge. Mom, Sam,
How did you know I was being discharged today? Wow.
Your father told us, Sam muttered, looking around the room as if appraising real estate. We decided you'd come stay with us. You need care, supervision. Nothing of the sort, I stated firmly. I can manage fine alone, and a colleague is already coming for me. Mom pursed her lips. A colleague? What about family? We're your family. We'll take care of you. I've cleared out your old room, bought groceries. Mom, I interrupted, feeling irritation rise. Thank you for caring, but I'm going to my own home and don't need round-the-clock care. The doctors said I can manage. What nonsense, she protested. You just had major surgery. Of course you're coming with us. Ms. Harrison, silently observing, asked quietly, Ms. Thompson, should I call the doctor? No need. I shook my head. Mom and I will discuss this calmly. Though I knew calm wasn't likely, Mom and Sam seemed determined to take me with them. I guessed why. In their home it would be easier to pressure me, manipulate me, try to force me back into the old pattern. There's nothing to discuss, Mom snapped. Pack your things. We're leaving. Our taxi is waiting downstairs. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm as Dr. Collins advised. Mom, I appreciate the concern, but I'm an adult. I decide where I live and who cares for me. I'm going home. You just don't understand what's best for you, Mom raised her voice. You're on medication, not responsible for your actions. It was the familiar tactic, trying to paint me as incompetent, just like at the bank when I blocked the cards. I am perfectly lucid, I replied calmly, and fully aware of my actions, but why are you so insistent I move in with you? That question seemed to catch them off guard. Sam stepped forward. What do you mean? I mean that after my decision to stop uncontrolled funding, you suddenly developed a burning desire to care for me. Doesn't that seem strange? Mom threw up her hands. How can you? We're worried. We're your family. The family who made a scene at the bedside of someone just out of surgery. The family who wanted to go on vacation, leaving me alone in the hospital. The family who tried to bypass my bank block. I knew it, Mum switched to a tragic whisper. She hasn't forgotten, hasn't forgiven. She'll hold this over us forever. That theatrical gesture, which in the past always made me feel guilty, now only brought weariness. I was so tired of these manipulations, this toxicity. Mum, I'm not holding it over you. I'm stating facts, and the facts say you don't need to care for me. You need control over me, and I refuse to be controlled. You ungrateful, selfish brat, Sam spat out, after everything your parents did for you. And what exactly have they done for me in the last 10 years, Sam? I looked him straight in the eye. Raising a child is undeniably a credit, but it's not a lifelong indulgence. He opened his mouth to retort, but at that moment, Marina, my colleague who was supposed to pick me up, walked in. Hi, she said cheerfully, not noticing the tension. I finished early and thought, oh, these are my relatives, I introduced. They also came to take me home. Marina looked confusedly from me to Mom and Sam. Oh, I see, she said uncertainly. Then maybe I'm intruding. Not at all. I smiled at her. You're right on time. I'm packed. We can go. So you're refusing to come with us? Mom flared up. Yes, Mom, I'm going to my home with Marina, but thanks for the offer. Sam stepped forward, his face contorted with anger. You don't know who you're messing with, Helen. We can sue you for failing to support your parents, and then— Young man, Ms. Harrison intervened unexpectedly, her voice firm. I'd advise you not to finish that sentence. Threats can be construed as pressure on a patient, a serious violation in a medical facility. Sam faltered, clearly not expecting this from the older nurse. Let's go, Sam. Mom pulled his sleeve. It's useless here. She'll do things her way anyway. At the door, she turned. You'll regret this, Helen. When you're all alone, you'll remember how you rejected your own family. After they left, heavy silence filled the room. Those your parents? Marina asked uncertainly. Mum and brother, I nodded. Sorry for the scene. Don't worry, she shrugged. Everyone has family dramas. Ready to go? I nodded gratefully. Ms. Harrison helped me gather the last things and walked me to the exit. At the hospital doors, she hugged me tightly. Stay strong, Helen Miller. And remember, sometimes you have to let go of the old to free your hands for the new. The ride home seemed both short and endless. Marina chatted about work, a new perfume she'd bought, her daughter getting her first A in physics. I half listened, gazing out the window at the city rushing by. Everything looked ordinary and yet new, as if I were seeing familiar streets with different eyes. My apartment greeted me with silence and the smell of emptiness. Marina helped me unpack, checked if there was food in the fridge, naturally empty, and offered to go shopping. No need, I stopped her. I'll order delivery, you've done enough. Sure. She looked at me doubtfully. I could stay the night, just in case. Absolutely sure, I smiled. I'm fine, really. I need some time alone to think. When Marina left, I slowly walked around the apartment, reacquainting myself. The living room with the big couch where I loved reading evenings. The kitchen where I rarely cooked, preferring quick snacks. The bedroom with the wide bed where I often fell asleep with my laptop finishing work projects. Everything was the same as before the accident, yet completely different. Or was it me who had changed? My gaze fell on the wall of photos in the living room. Family pictures from different years. Me with my parents at the seaside, Sam and me at his graduation, Mum and Dad at their 30th anniversary, which I'd organized and paid for 3 years ago. Remembering Ms. Harrison's advice, I decisively took down all the photos and put them in the closet, not throwing them away, just out of sight, to stop reopening wounds. That evening, Dad called. "How are you, sweetheart?" he asked softly. "Get home okay?" "Yes, Dad, all fine." I settled more comfortably on the couch with a cup of herbal tea. "And you? How are you?" "Okay," he sighed. "Mum, of course, is furious. Says you betrayed her, that you're ungrateful. Well, you know, I know." "And Sam?" "He's angry too, still talking about some lawsuit, looking online about children's obligations to parents." "Waste of time," I said wearily. "I have no legal obligations to you." "I know, and I'm trying to explain, but they won't listen." We were silent. Then Dad asked cautiously, "Helen, could you help with my medicine? I have a prescription for Concor and Cardiomagnil, and we're really short on money now." "Of course, Dad," I answered without hesitation. "How much?" He named a sum, quite small compared to what I usually gave them. "I'll transfer it to your card, and Dad, you can always count on my help for medicine or groceries. But we'll do it differently now. You tell me what you specifically need. I help." "Thank you, daughter." Relief sounded in his voice. "You have no idea how much this means." After talking with Dad, I felt a strange peace. Despite the conflict with Mom and Sam, I hadn't severed all family ties. Dad seemed to understand and accept my terms. Maybe the others would come around in time, but even if not, I was ready to live on my terms. Before bed, I opened my email and found a message from the insurance company. They'd reviewed my case and were ready to pay compensation for the accident, roughly equivalent to half a year's salary. This money gave me an extra safety net, freedom of maneuver. I could afford not to rush back to work, recover fully, maybe even go somewhere to rest. France, I thought, smiling. I still hadn't been to France. Why not? When I fully recovered, when doctors allowed travel, I could go to Paris alone, or maybe with a colleague who'd become a true friend during these difficult days. This thought warmed me as I fell asleep in my bed, in my home, gaining a new understanding of the word freedom. The next 2 weeks passed in relative peace. I recovered, rested a lot, read books I'd long postponed, watched movies I'd never had time for. Colleagues visited often, bringing food, sharing office news. Mum didn't call or come. Sam sent one message, full of accusations and threats, which I ignored. Dad called daily, sometimes dropped by, quietly, as if afraid to disturb, bringing fresh bread from that same bakery in our old neighborhood, where we'd bought loaves since my childhood. Dr. Collins, when I went for my checkup, was pleased. Healing beautifully, he said, examining the scar on my side. Another couple of weeks and back to normal life, but don't rush work. Your body needs time to fully recover. I know, I nodded. My director said I can return when I'm fully ready. Good director you have, Doctor. Collins smiled. And your family situation? Complicated, I answered honestly, but I'm managing. No doubt, he looked at me seriously. You know, Helen Miller. Over the years I've seen many patients and can say that sometimes a physical trauma leads to healing of the soul. Strange as it sounds. His words resonated deeply. Indeed, the accident that nearly cost me my life had paradoxically gifted me a new one, more conscious, more authentic. One evening when I felt well enough, the doorbell rang. Dad stood on the threshold clutching a small bundle. Dad, I was happy to see him. Come in. He entered, looked around as if seeing my apartment for the first time, though he'd been here many times. I won't stay long, he said, sitting on the edge of the couch. Just wanted to give you something. He handed me the bundle, old newspaper folded several times. Inside was money. A few thousand rubles in small bills. What's this? I was surprised. It's repayment, Dad said, embarrassed. I saved from my pension little by little. I know it's nothing compared to what you gave us, but Dad, I looked at him, moved. You don't owe me money. I helped you, not lent it. I know, but it's important to me. Important to show I can be independent, not a helpless old man living off his daughter. His eyes held so much resolve, so much pride I couldn't refuse. Okay, I nodded, taking the bundle. Thank you, but you know I'll still help with medicine. I know. He gave a weak smile, and I wanted to say I'm proud of you for finding the strength to change things. I never could. His confession touched me deeply. At that moment, I felt a new bond forming between us, more honest, more mature than before. We talked long that evening. Dad told me he'd gotten a job as a consultant in a small electronics store, 3 days a week, a small but steady paycheck. Can you imagine? He laughed. At my age, thought no one would hire me. But they needed someone who understands tech, and you know I like it, feel useful, needed, and not sitting home all day listening to Mum's complaints. I was genuinely happy for him. The job gave him not just extra income, but self-respect, a sense of his own worth, which he seemed to have lost after retirement. And Mom? How is she? Dad sighed. Still angry, blaming you, me, everyone else won't accept change, but she was always stubborn about her views on life. And Sam? Is he job hunting? Seems like he started, Dad shrugged. Sent out a few resumes, but always finds reasons why this or that place isn't right. Schedule inconvenient, office too far, salary too small. I nodded understandingly. It wouldn't be easy for Sam to adjust after so many years of irresponsibility, but perhaps this trial would benefit him, like it had benefited Dad. He'll manage, I said. He just needs time. When Dad left, I saw him to the door and hugged him tightly, a gesture rare in our family. Thanks, Dad, for everything. Thank you, he whispered, for not turning away from me after all that happened. I closed the door behind him and returned to the living room, feeling a strange lightness in my soul. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe at least with Dad we could build healthy relationships. That evening I opened my laptop and started looking for tours to France. Summer was approaching, my health improved daily, and the prospect of a Paris trip no longer seemed distant. This time, I thought, smiling, I'll go myself and savor every moment. Life, which a month ago seemed a predictable rut with no chance to turn, now opened before me like a blank page, ready to accept any story I decided to write on it. And that story would be mine, from the first line to the last. 6 months passed. Golden autumn painted Chicago's parks in shades of yellow and red. My life had changed beyond recognition. In my new role as Deputy Director for Key Client Relations, I'd found my footing. Initially tough. New responsibilities, subordinates, a different level of responsibility. But I soon caught the rhythm and even began enjoying the work. I'd learned the main thing, to say no. To colleagues when requests were unreasonable. To clients when demands were unrealistic. And to myself when tempted to stay late instead of doing yoga or meeting friends. Relations with family were mixed. Dad had truly changed. Working as an electronics store consultant, he seemed younger, as if shedding a decade. He visited me weekly, sometimes with treats, sometimes just to talk. We'd grown closer than ever. With Mom it was harder. After months of accusations and complaints, she'd resigned herself to the new situation. I helped with medicine and urgent bills, but these were targeted transfers for specific needs. Mum still considered me selfish, but no longer tried to manipulate. Sam, unexpectedly, got a job as a programmer at a small company. He'd lasted 2 months already, a personal record. Sometimes it seemed the accident that nearly took my life had become a turning point for the whole family. In July, with doctor's permission, I finally flew to France with Marina, who'd become a close friend. Paris was nothing like I'd imagined planning the trip for my parents. Marina and I didn't stick to a strict schedule, savored the moment, wandered Montmartre's narrow streets, took photos by the Eiffel Tower. Sitting one day in a small cafe overlooking the city, I felt for the first time that my life truly belonged to me, as if a tight band constricting my chest for years had loosened, letting me breathe freely. Back in Chicago, I plunged into new hobbies, signed up for Italian classes, started swimming, bought a theatre subscription. Each evening, I wrote in my journal not work tasks, but moments I was grateful for that day. Today, exactly 6 months after the accident, I stood at my apartment window watching leaves fall in the park opposite when the phone rang. Mom flashed on the screen. Helen, her voice was unusually quiet. Could you come over? We need to talk. I agreed, though inwardly bracing for another attempt at pressure. Dad opened the door. He looked younger, fitter, the effect of work and regular walks. Come in, he smiled. Mum's in the kitchen. In the kitchen, familiar from childhood, little had changed. The same small flowered wallpaper, the old Zill refrigerator, curtains Mom had embroidered before I was born. Mom stood by the stove. Her gaze held no usual reproach, more like uncertainty. "Sit down, Helen. I wanted to talk about us." What followed was a complete surprise. "I've thought a lot lately," Mom continued, "especially after your father got his job and changed, and I realized I was wrong. The words were so unexpected I was speechless. We got used to relying on you." She looked directly at me. "Took your help for granted. Thought only of our needs, not what it cost you." "Mom, I didn't mind helping, but your attitude hurt, like it was my duty." "I know," she nodded. "Now I know, and how we behaved after your accident was unforgivable." Sincere, non-theatrical tears glistened in her eyes. "What changed, Mom?" I asked. "You see, your father, he became a different person, more confident, even happy. I started thinking maybe we've lived wrong all these years." She said she wanted to return to the library, even part-time. "Sitting home watching TV makes my head spin. At the library, I always felt I belonged." We talked for 2 more hours, for the first time in years. Not about money or problems, but about life. Mum asked about my work, France plans, and listened, really listened. As I left, she hugged me tightly, like in childhood. "I'm so proud of you, daughter. You're strong, always stronger than me." Returning home, I felt uplifted. Of course, I wasn't naive. One conversation wouldn't undo years of ingrained habits, but something important had shifted in them and in me. At home, I opened my journal and wrote, "Today, I'm grateful for the strength that let me change what seemed unchangeable." Looking out the window at passers-by in the park, walking dogs, pushing strollers, holding hands, living their imperfect, complex but real lives, I remembered the moment in the hospital when I decided to change my life. Then it seemed almost suicidal. Now it was the start of a new path for us all. My phone pinged, a message from Marina. "Don't forget tomorrow's pottery workshop. Meet at 7. Watching the rain outside, I caught myself thinking that for the first time in many years, I felt truly free. Free from guilt, endless obligations, the fear of disappointing. The future no longer frightened me. On the contrary, I looked forward to it, knowing I now charted my own course. The most important thing the accident taught me, life is too short to spend it trying to meet others' expectations, and I intended to do just that with each new day, each new breath.